Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Manning, so we'll welcome to the Change Management webinar, and thank you for joining us. We'll get started in a second. Just to introduce myself, I'm many of you probably know me, but I'm Dave Manning. I run an supply chain education and consulting company called DM Integration Limited. I'm also the owner, or part owner, with my wife, that is, so junior partner, of a company called Horses for Change, who are a leadership development, team building, and change management company. And so the material you're going to see me use today actually is under the branding of Horses for Change, but these two companies operate hand in glove, really, as sister companies. DMI mainly focused on supply chain, and Horses for Change mainly focused on leadership development and change management. So that's why you see the logo on this first page. So just a little explanation for that. But thank you again for joining, and let's get going. So there are many transformation programs around the world, and increasingly we see projects that are trying to drive towards improving businesses in some shape, form, or other. And yet, from a fairly old data from John Kotter here, we see that most transformation efforts fail to deliver their real benefits, and it's for these reasons. Not establishing a greater sense, enough sense of urgency, not having a clear vision, not communicating that vision by a factor of 10, not removing the obstacles to that new vision, not systematically planning and creating for short-term wins, and declaring victory too soon, and not anchoring changes in the culture. So these are old messages. However, my observation is I still see these things true today. Whether it be a transformation program being driven by the implementation of some new system, or a transformation program that's looking at the development of a process of some nature, they all suffer these types of issues. Hence, the management of change is really key. If we think about it, if we think about a systems implementation, implementing systems is actually quite easy. You usually need deep pockets and a large checkbook, but that's not the challenge. Even looking at new processes and trying to follow best practice process is also not really the challenge. It's perhaps more difficult than the systems one, but you can easily go and copy best practice from somewhere. The real challenge in all of these transformation programs or projects is a people challenge, and it's a change management challenge, really. That's the focus that we need to look at. In fact, from an SAP or from a systems and SAP standpoint, I find it, I don't know whether it's brave or I'm not sure what the logic is, but SAP themselves say that 80% of their systems implementations fail to deliver the benefits. 80%. Now, that's like saying, please buy my car and it doesn't drive. I don't know how they have the audacity to do that. However, is the problem that SAP is a rubbish system? Well, that's not true. SAP is a perfectly good system, as most systems are. It's nothing to do with the system that makes them fail or fail to deliver those benefits. It's always to do with the people, and it's all to do with change management, always. In my 30-odd years of doing this, I've never seen any different. So the fact that this is 1995 when this was first said by John Kotter, I think it still rings true today. So how are we going to make sure we don't fall into that trap? Another interesting model that I came across a few years ago, this is from a guy called Peter Wiggins. I don't know if anybody knows who Peter Wiggins was. He's passed away now, actually. But he was the IT and HR director at Nissan Cars when they first set up in the Northeast here. Now, I find that a very interesting thing. That was back in the 80s. I find it a very interesting combination of titles. IT and HR, systems and people. Extremely unusual in those days to see that combination together, and actually still pretty unusual to see that combination together. And one of the models he came up with is this one. And what he's saying is that if you look at the vertical axis, that is how process focused an organization is. So the orientation of the organization is around process. So the high level of process discipline or process definition, etc. The horizontal axis is to do with people. How people focused are we? How much do we take people with us? How much do we take people along the journey with us? How well do we manage change? Are people thriving in our business on an individual level, not just as from a business perspective? So the horizontal axis is about people. The vertical axis is about process. What he was saying was he used these 4 A words, and what he was saying is if we're low on process but also low on people, what you find is a very apathetic organization. 9 to 5, job's worth, just come to work to earn the money, etc. If, on the other hand, we are pretty high on our people focus, but we are low on our process, discipline, etc., then what you have, you are in the right-hand box, the right and bottom box, which he called anarchic. And I've put in brackets there. That's the sort of classic firefighting environment, the short-term environment. Everybody running around like the proverbial, doing a great job, the best they can, but actually causing more fires than, as they put fires out, they light more. And I find that a very typical and common type environment. It's a sort of environment where, if you think about when you come to work in the morning, you've got 20 things on your to-do list today. That might be in a bit of paper or on a laptop or whatever it is. How long on the average day is it before that list gets shot to hell? Or do we come in the morning at 9 o'clock, work through our list, go home in the evening, everything's done, ticked off? Is that the normal day? Or is the constant firefighting, the change, the chaos, the chasing around type environment what you're familiar with? And in my observation, there are more of the firefighting environments than there are of the, tick my list off and go home at 5 o'clock. Now, what that is the firefighting environment gets the job done. That's for sure. It does get the job done, but at what cost? At what cost to customer service? At what cost to financial cost to the business? And at what cost to the individual from a wellness perspective? So people are running around doing a proverbial. Some people love it. Some people love to be heroes. Most people are stressed by it. And when you're stressed, you're not thriving. So yes, we get the job done, but it's not a pleasant place to be. People aren't thriving mentally. And it's costing us money. And typically we can't do right for doing wrong, and therefore customer service goes down. At some point, somebody will say, what we need to do is change. What we need to be is in the top right-hand box, where we're achieving customer service, we're achieving financial results, we're achieving an environment where people are thriving. That's where we need to be. And what we need to do is we need to put in better processes. Better processes might mean, and often does mean, new systems. So our attempt is to go from bottom right to top right. That's where we'd like to be, the best of all worlds. However, if in that attempt to implement or to get ourselves to the top right, and if that includes, for example, the implementation of some systems, if we don't take the people with us on a basis of they understand why we're doing that, going on that journey, and more importantly, why we're asking them to behave and follow the process we are. I emphasize the word why there. People change not because they know how to do things. People change because they know why they're doing things and why it's important. If we try to go to that top right box without taking the people on that journey with us through a change management program that's fundamentally focused on the why, then we don't end up the top right, we end up top left, which Peter Wickens referred to as antagonistic. In other words, you'll hear people say, oh, look what they've done to us now. Why do I have to do this transaction? Why do I have to fill in this form? Why do I have to follow this process? They're doing everything to prevent me doing a good job. They're just getting in the way. And they become angry young men and women. People don't stay angry young men for very long. So what actually happens is they get away from the antagonistic box because it's too stressful and they slip back into apathy. Oh, well, that's how it is then. And what's happened is, in our attempt to go top right, we've actually ended up bottom left, having spent a whole bunch of money on a transformation program and or a new system. So the key here is taking people with us. And I emphasize the why, not the how. I'll give you an illustration of how people change or why people change. I live near a town called Chester. This story would be true in every city in the world because I've tried it out practically in every city in the world. In Chester, there is a park in the middle of the city. It's called Grosvenor Park. It's a very nice place. It's got rose gardens and grass and lawns and flower beds, etc. If you walk around that park, you will find signs on the grass that says, no ball games on the grass. But what do you see happening? Yeah, you've got it. You see people playing football on the grass. In fact, you see parents sat on park benches watching their kids play football on the grass using the sign as a goalpost. Now, what is wrong with those parents? What's the problem here? Is the problem that they can't read the sign? Well, I don't think so, because I think most of those parents were trained how to read the sign several years ago. So it's not the how, it's not they can't read the sign, that's not the issue. What is the issue? Well, in my opinion, it's because they don't get the why. And because they don't get the why, you hear them say things like, stupid rule, kids have got to play somewhere. Now, if the sign had said, no ball games on the grass, because there's poisonous snakes in it, I think we'd have a different situation. Now what the parent would say is, look, I know you've still got to get some exercise and play football. However, you can't play here, you have to play there. And the change from here to there has come about because of the understanding of the why and not the how. Of course, you need to be able to read, I get that. Training's focus is all about how. Education's focus is all about why. And what very few companies do in their transformational program or in their drive to get to that top right is focus enough time, energy and effort and commitment to the education side of this process and the education of people in terms of behavior and why versus please press this button on this new computer and there's the screen I want you to read and this is the transaction I want you to use. So strong message here that if we're going to succeed in change management, it has to be founded in the why. So what are the key drivers of change then? Well, in order for something to change, we have to have all three of these things in place. If you don't have all three in place, things will not change. The first thing we need to have is a discontent with the present. If we're not discontent with now, then why would we go and change? Yeah, it's a great idea, it sounds very interesting, but why bother? I'm not unhappy as we are. And that is why change in the very successful companies, very profitable companies, very big companies, very successful companies, is probably more difficult than it is in people who are suffering. The problem is, when people are suffering, then it's often too late. So it could well be a question of creating some discontent. That doesn't mean going around poking people in the eye with a sharp stick. It means helping people see why what has worked in the past, because it's got us here and we're successful, but it may not work in the future. So we need that discontent. Then we need a vision of what that future looks like. That's where the why comes in. This is the painting a positive picture of the future, which excites us. And then it's a path of least risk to get from one to the other. Very few people and very few companies will bet the farm on something. In other words, bet everything. If we don't find a least risk path, then people will not take the leap. Now, there are some examples where that wasn't the case. You could argue that Boeing bet the farm on the 747 aeroplane. If that had not worked, then Boeing probably would not be the company it is today. So there are people who bet everything on something, but it's unusual. And therefore, what we need in any change program is to be clear about these three elements. Discontent is not telling people they've done a bad job in the past. Most companies, and the place, as I said, where it's most difficult to change are successful. So we're not changing because we're about to go under. We're changing because we want to continue to be successful in the future. And that's the discontent message that we need to try to drive. So there is, obviously many of you will know, a change loop. What really happens here is we're traveling along in a perfectly content state, sort of almost dumb, fat and happy. And everything's going okay, we're content, we're profitable, we're doing okay, we're successful, etc. And then something happens that says, but we want to get better. So when we start to that transformation program or that change program, the first thing that starts to happen is we fall into a state of disbelief. In other words, well, what was wrong with the past? We're okay, aren't we? Do we really need to change? Yes, it's a nice, new, shiny system, but I can't see the point of it, can you? So we fall into a level of disbelief. And then we go a little bit deeper. We go into the emotional element. And the emotional element is beyond disbelief. It's almost active resistance. Hi, I don't see the point in this, do you? Why are we bothering? We were perfectly okay when we had the old one, weren't we? This is ridiculous. It's more effort. They're asking me to work longer now to go through this chair, and we become quite emotional. Finally, we accept the need to change. And it's that point there, that turning point, where change management is most key. It is at this point that we need to focus on the why education. And it's at this point we need to focus upon true, genuine leadership. It's education and leadership which will get us away from or round the corner from emotion into, okay, I can see the point of this now. Yeah. Okay, right, we've got to get on with it, haven't we? Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's got to be done, So we've now accepted the need for that change. Then we start to renew. I can see this is going to be actually a lot better. This is really going to be, it's going to be good. I can see lots of benefits in this now. Actually, it's easier to work this way, isn't it? And actually, it's more successful. So we start to renew our feelings of how things are going to be in the future. Whoops, wrong one, sorry. And finally, we get back to content. And content continues. Actually, that second content should be higher. In diagrammatical terms, it should be higher than the first one. Because now I'm going along in my content mode. Previously, now I've renewed myself into this new form, this new process, this new behavior, this new system. Now I'm content again, but actually I'm more content because I'm actually performing better. By the way, as soon as you start to do that, as soon as you start to perform better and continue along that new content line, guess what's going to happen? You're going to start going around the change loop again, because this is constant. The world does not stand still. The world does not, God up there does not look down and say, oh my goodness, XYZ company have just been through their transformation program. Now, let's stop the world changing. That is not the way it happens. Change will continue forever. The competition changes, the environment changes, the customer demands changes, the situation, governments, the economy are constantly in change, and therefore we need to get to a point where we love change. I ask this question many times of, do you and your organization like change? The majority of people say no. The majority of people will say, no, I don't like change. I'm not resistant to it necessarily, but I don't like it. Those successful organizations in the future will be those ones that don't just not like it. It will be those organizations that love change, that constantly seek it out and constantly drive change into their organization. Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen anyway. What's the new norm going to look like? I don't know. What's the impact of global warming going to have on us? I don't know. What's the new economic world going to look like in terms of in the UK here post-Brexit? What's it going to look like post-pandemic? All big questions. All will drive change. However, we need to accept that and live in that and get to actually love it and manage it well. So one of my observations is that very few people believe they're perfect. In other words, is improvement possible in your part of the business or in you? Most people will say, yes, of course it is, because otherwise they are saying I'm perfect. Very few people will say that. However, what most people also believe is the greatest level of change required is somewhere else. In other words, you speak to sales and say, could you improve in the sales function? They will say, yes, of course we could. We could do a better job at this and a better job at that. But the real problem, isn't it? The real problem is manufacturing. That's where the biggest change needs to happen. You speak to manufacturing and they say, can you change? Yes, of course we can make some improvements. But the real issue is finance. That's where the problem is. And so we often look to somewhere else that says that's where the real change must happen. The other guy must change. Everybody needs to understand, and this is the Jack Welch statement, everybody needs to understand that they have two jobs. The one they're doing right now, and the second job is the one they want to do better. So how am I going to do what I do today better, not just how am I going to do the one I got today? Indeed, Jack Welch had a website that he sent out to all of his MDs of his organization, and it was called destroyyourcompany.com. And lots of people came back to him that worked for him and said, Jack, we're really doing very well. We're really successful. Why are you telling us to change? He said, because now is the time to change. When you're successful is indeed the best time to look at how I'm going to do things better and differently for the future. So there is a situation within change management which is referred to as the vicious circle. And what happens is something happens. So we're in the present now and something happens that needs to be solved. What most people will do to solve that something is they will trawl into their history. They'll look in the past. They'll call on their memory, their paradigms, their judgments, their assessments, their interpretations, their myths and beliefs, and the legends. Tried that one before, didn't we? All of those type of things are looking back and saying, that's where I'm going to find the solution to whatever this thing is that I'm trying to change now. And it's known as the vicious circle, because all that happens is we constantly reinforce those memories, those paradigms, those myths, those beliefs, those legends. It's continually driving us back into thinking backwardly. The better approach is something happens now that I need to solve. Don't look backwards, look forwards. Stand in your future. Understand what you would do to solve this problem, how you would make this change if you were stood in that future, and almost look back down on yourself and drag yourself up the hill as compared to trying to march up that hill from a position of history. That is a much more successful approach to making change happen, by standing in our future and visualizing what it might be like in that future, and how would we solve this problem or make this change in that future. Of course, that requires us to have a vision. If we don't have a clear vision that is compelling, that is exciting, that is outrageous, that is tough, if we don't have those things, then of course we only have our history, and therefore we fall back on that history and go back into the vicious circle again. So the virtuous circle would be, I suppose it should say virtuous circles really, but the virtuous circle would be to paint that picture of a future, be committed to it, and then solve our problems based upon it. And that's going to lead us into one of the topics that we wanted to cover in this webinar, which is what we call the bridge. Some people refer to this as the rope. And so it's going to come here for a second, but let me just deal with this one first. So what we're trying to do, what causes change? Well, because we have a vision of how we want to be, because we're discontent with the present. Another key issue here is an acceptance of the burning platform. The burning platform is a phrase used to describe the discontent. And actually, it's very interesting where that phrase came from. It's a sad story, actually. I don't know whether you've heard the burning platform phrase before, but what it really means is a compelling reason for change. It actually comes from many years ago in the North Sea, when there was an oil field disaster called Piper Alpha. I think 260 odd people died on that disaster, so it was clearly very sad. However, there was a helicopter filming the disaster with a CNN news crew in it, and they caught sight, the cameraman caught sight of a guy on this platform. He's about 80 foot above the sea. The sea is on fire. There's about 20-foot waves in it, and the guy jumps off the platform into the sea. And the journalist with him, with the cameraman, said, if that chap survives that jump, which he probably won't, but if that chap survives that jump, I've absolutely got to go and ask him what convinced him to jump. Happily, he did survive that jump, and I saw the interview with the guy on CNN in the States. And the journalist, as he said he would, said, you know, what persuaded you to make that jump on that night? And the guy's answer was amazing. He said, it was an easy decision. And the journalist said, it was an easy decision to jump 80 foot off the platform into a sea that's on fire with 20-foot waves in it. He said, oh yeah. He said, let me tell you something. Now, the platform behind me was on fire. It was about to blow up. He said, I knew that if I stayed here, I was going to die. He said, I knew also that if I jumped down there, I might die. It was a very easy decision. So, compelling reason. What is your burning platform? Hopefully it's not as dramatic as the one I've just described, but what is the burning platform for change? One thing I will say about that is a burning platform of that nature will create movement. It will create change, just as it did with that chap there, but it will not sustain change. Sustained change has to come from a vision, because I'll bet you a pound to a penny that that chap who jumped off the platform that night, I bet you he doesn't drive around at weekends now looking for platforms to jump off. I bet he hasn't turned it into a hobby. Did it create movement once? Yes, it did. There was a compelling reason for that. Will it sustain movement and sustain change? No. Only vision will do that. Only the belief in that vision will do that. So yes, I think burning platforms are important, but the vision and the commitment to that vision and the enthusiasm for that vision and the understanding of why that vision is important are key. Now, vision is a grand word. I'm not talking about necessarily the vision of the company. I'm talking about the vision of the individual. Why does he get up in the morning? The vision of the team, the vision of the process, the vision of the function. Yes, the vision of the company as well, but it's not a grandiose thing. It's why will you want to change? And is it worth the journey? Which is why it needs to be exciting and engaging, basically. So that means we have to create that future. So we're painting a picture of this created future. And the methodology that I believe in strongly is this thing that's called the bridge or the rope. And let me talk through that. It is based upon a series of conversations. So the bridge or the rope, what basically we're trying to do here is just saying we know what the current reality is. By the way, don't spend too much time analysing the current reality, which a lot of people do. A lot of people spend a lot of time doing as is. Just do enough as is to make sure you're discontent with how it is, and you understand enough about it to know what has got to change. And then what we want to do is paint that picture, that created future, paint the picture of what it's going to be. Now, most people will then say, okay, we know what it is, current reality, we know where we want to go, let's start marching across the bridge or climbing the rope, etc., going up the hill towards that future. For me, that is the wrong thing to do. This technique, which is called leadership in action, is based upon a series of specific, structured, team-based conversations, which are aimed at breaking paradigms, are aimed at creating the right mindset, but depend upon certain behaviors. They depend on having good listening skills. They also depend on having good speaking skills. And when we talk about listening and speaking, we're not only talking about words. So more than 80% of the communication we have between us is non-verbal. So no matter what we say and what we hear, then most of our communication is occurring through body language, through actions. So when we say listening and speaking, we mean both verbal and non-verbal. And then we need to have an ability to put the unspeakables on the table. Those sort of things, the things that everybody knows that it happens, or everybody recognizes that situation, but nobody will talk about it. It's the sort of we don't talk about that. That's one of the things that that just happens here. And we need an environment to allow those unspeakables to be put on the table. And there's a specific conversation going to come in a minute where the unspeakables have to be able to be spoken. And to do that, we need to have a safe environment, a no blame culture. I've asked many companies, thousands of companies actually, whether there is a blame culture in their organization. Nearly everybody has said no, especially if I ask that question to a senior group. No, our doors are always open, I'm open to listening, etc. However, there are very few organizations I've ever met in my 30 years where some form of blame culture doesn't exist. And so therefore we have to be very conscious of being able to put those things on the table in a safe place. So the first conversation we should have, and I don't start at the bottom now, so I notice I've leapt from current reality to the future. The first conversation, and this is a deliberate conversation, we will not move on to the next conversation until we are satisfied that this one has been completed. And it is a conversation for commitment. Are we committed to that future? Are we committed to this program? Are we committed to this change, whatever the future is that we're talking about here? Are we truly committed to it? And I drive language when I do this in workshop form. So if you go around the room after having this conversation, say, okay, guys, are we committed to this? If you hear a guy say, yes, certainly, I think I can support this. I certainly will do whatever I can, given the right resources, to be able to support you on this journey. Is that person committed to this future? In my opinion, no. As compared to the person who says, you can count on me to do what it takes to achieve that vision, to achieve that change. Is that person committed? I think so. Now, these are only words, so you might be saying, oh, well, it's just semantics. I don't think so. I want a genuine, from the heart commitment to whatever that future is, to whatever that change is that we're trying to drive. And I'm not going to go on to the next conversation until I have completed that first one. In other words, the conversation for commitment. The second conversation, is one for possibilities. So now we're committed to that future. So now, what would it make possible? So if we could be there, what would now be possible for us? Oh, well, if we were there, we'd be able to open up that new market in the Asian market. Oh, if we were there, we'd be able to grow our business by 20%. Oh, if we were there, we'd be able to have an environment where people are truly thriving in the organization. Now, that conversation for possibilities makes us think about, if I get to that future, let me change that. When I get to that future, what will we be then able to achieve? What possibilities are there? And of course, by having that conversation, guess what it does to your commitment? It reinforces it. And only once I've had that conversation with possibilities and I'm satisfied that we now have reinforced our commitment, will I move on to the next conversation, which is a conversation for opportunities. Conversation for opportunity is, okay, if we were committed to this, we are committed to this, and that would make this possible. What are some of the things that we could do that would make those possibilities more likely? Oh, well, if we could achieve that future, then we'd be able to open up the Asian market. That would be made possible from that future. Oh, actually, what we need to do is to open up or find a location in Asia where we would be able to open up our offices or our site. So what are the opportunities that I could now have that are going to reinforce the chances of those possibilities happening and reinforce my commitment? So it's a constant loop around to reinforce the commitment, reinforce the commitment, reinforce the commitment, and gain understanding of what that future means. Only then, only once I've had that conversation, or those three conversations, will I allow myself to say, let's have a conversation for action. So what's our implementation plan then, chaps? What are we actually going to do to get there? Now, the reason I've gone through it in that way is because guess what most people do? We have a current reality. We have a vision of our future. Guess what we dive into? Well, we're action men, aren't we? We make things happen. We dive into actions. And then partway through this change program or this transformation program, something happens. And the response you hear is, it was never going to work in the first place, was it? I only went along because Fred said the boss wanted it, so that's why I tied in, but actually I never thought it was going to work in the first place. You hear that type of comment so many times. You will not have that comment if you've been through the commitment, possibility, opportunity conversation and only then come up with the action plan. Now, the final conversation is one that we don't want to have, but we need to allow for. And that's a conversation for breakdown. And this is where the no blame, listening and open environment needs to be in play. Because the conversation for breakdown, it needs to be, you need to be able to say and have no fear at saying, I want to declare that I have lost my commitment to this project, to this transformation, to this change, because of XYZ. Because we said, when we went through the conversations, we said we would be, freeing up some resource to be able to work on this. Well, that was part of my reason for being committed to this. However, that's not happened. And while that situation is in play, you can no longer rely on my commitment to this created future, to this vision, to this change. Now that's often a brave thing. That's often, it breaks down the unspeakables, because clearly, you know, this project was sponsored by the MD, and, you know, it would be pretty career limiting to say that I'm not committed to it anymore, even though I'm not. And so the conversation of a breakdown is not something we want to have, but something that we need to allow for. So it allows people to say, what's missing rather than what went wrong? Why have you lost your commitment? Well, because this is missing. My example was resource. We focus on cause, not the blame. So the breakdown conversation is not about it's Fred's fault. It's about, well, Fred hasn't been able to free the resource. Why is that? Oh, well, because we overloaded him with some other projects, didn't we? Yeah, you're right. So it allows us to focus upon that cause as compared to blame Fred. It's moved from resignation to positive action. In other words, well, it was never going to work, was it? We were daft to start this. Certainly in this timescale, it was never, no chance. It allows us then to say, well, actually, let's have a positive conversation about what could we do to get this project, this transformation back on track. Why do we want to do that? Because we are truly committed to it. At least we were truly committed to it. So it allows us to renew that commitment by addressing those things that have taken that commitment away. This, of course, depends and assumes that we've been through the conversation for commitment, possibilities that's reinforced my commitment, opportunities that's reinforced my commitment, and we've put together a good action plan. It then distinguishes between facts and interpretations. You know, it puts the actions on the table. Now, you can't put actions on the table to address interpretations. You have to put actions on the table to address facts. This is not happening. This is missing. This is not working. Not this went wrong. And therefore allow ourselves to recover quickly, to get back on track, and really to get back on the commitment track that we're trying to go through. Hence, this bridge conversation, this one, is for me the best change management process that I know of, because it addresses the things that are really important in terms of managing any form of change, which is the commitment, and it's the people element of change, which is the key driver here, as compared to the implementation of, you know, a new system, for example, or a new process, for example. It truly addresses the thing that is most difficult to change, and that is indeed people and behaviours. Hence, I would strongly recommend it. It's as I say, referred to as leadership in action. And the Horses for Change business, and indeed my own business, DMI, we use this in a series of workshops. So we are launching an online workshop that develops this process further from a change management perspective. And COVID allowing, we were starting now to run again live versions. And by the way, the Horses for Change, if you haven't come across them before, the clue is in the name. It's horses, and it's real horses. And what we do is we use real horses and a series of exercises in those workshops to be able to hold the mirror to yourself. So I talked about the non-verbal communication and how important that is, and how your behavior is important, and how your behavior communicates. And that's part of the challenge of change management. Well, horses are brilliant at holding the mirror to you. And that's because horses are prey animals, and in the wild, they communicate with each other all the time, but they don't speak English. They actually do speak, but they don't speak English. So they're communicating by body language. And what they're really looking for is they're looking for leadership to a better place. So what they want, leadership, the change that they want to driven by leadership is I want to get to pasture, new pasture. I want to get to water. but I don't want that lion over there to eat me. And they look for leadership and commitment from a leader to be able to do that. They don't talk, so they read body language. If they believe that that leader is genuinely committed to that new future, better grass, better pasture, better water, safety, then they will willingly follow. If they believe that leader is only in it for himself or herself, then they just want to be the leader, so they want to be top dog type thing, then they won't follow. And all of that communication has happened through body language. And so when we run our workshops, our live workshops, then we use the horses to hold the mirror to ourselves. It's quite fascinating. We've had people in those sessions where, and I don't mean to insult any bankers, but young professional, Harvard carrying bankers go in the arena with the horse to try and do a little exercise, and they go in there with the can-do attitude, the you will follow me, this is how we do it, etc., etc. Why? Because I say so. And the horse completely ignores it. And we've had people around the edge from the same company around the arena say, it's just like he is at work. No wonder nobody will follow him or her to that created future, because actually they're reading the communication and they haven't had that opportunity of going through the commitment, possibility, opportunity, and action, and there is a safe place to break down. Not break down, but to allow the conversation for breakdown. So I would strongly recommend this as the best approach I've come across. Why declare a big breakdown? We said that. So the critical success factors here for me are leadership, as I've just sort of hinted at, are having a painted vision. Doesn't have to be the grandiose vision. It can be the vision for the company, but it could be the vision for the team or the function or the area or the individual even. Having a focus on education, and that means having a focus on understanding the why, not the how. Genuine commitment to change through the bridge that I've just described. We do have to put resource into most changes. We have to go the extra mile for a period of time. Hence, we need to ensure that we've put those resources in. Hence, the conversation for commitment, possibility, opportunity, and then action. The action would be, well, we put a team together, or we free up some resource, or we get some resource. The other key factor in any change, while this is never going to stop, as I said earlier, people have an attention span. Companies have an attention span. So we want to do things as quickly as we can, not rush, not cut corners, but as quickly as we can, success breeds success, that type of story. And this is one thing I see very often in IT implementations or systems implementations. We set off with the best of intentions to make this a transformation project, not an IT implementation. And that's best of intentions. However, because we don't do a good job at education, because we don't do a good job at formally going across that bridge or structuring the change management process through that bridge, because we don't do those things, then what happens is the project starts to be focused on IT. We haven't allocated the right resources, and it starts to extend and extend and extend and extend. And at some point, the cost of those projects starts to escalate. And at some point, the finance director will say, for goodness sake, can we just turn this damn thing on? We can't afford the burn rate of the money. Yeah, but we haven't got people with us yet. We haven't done the transformation piece. I don't care. Just turn it on. And I've seen that situation countless times in many IT projects, and it's a major mistake. And that ties back to one of my early slides. It says, the Cotter slide, declaring victory too soon. So we turn the system on and say, done it, victory, cracked it, implemented that change now. No, you haven't, because you haven't taken the people with you back along with Peter Wickens' his model. It's going to hurt. So that's the resource allocation. No pain with no gain is very true. So recognize that. But celebrate success. Have an early win and celebrate those early wins because success breeds success. And there is usually a need for a burning platform, a critical reason or a compelling reason for change. However, it is deliberately the last bullet on that slide. And vision is deliberately, leadership and vision and education are deliberately the first three on that slide. So yes, as I said, burning platforms will create movement. They do, but they will never sustain movement. Only the first three will do that. So guys, that was my view of what change management should look like. I'll just leave you with the final thoughts here. These are just a few phrases I picked up from along the way. A few quotes rather that I picked up along the way. But we have 10 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Most welcome. If you do, that would be great. If you send them in to us, that would be wonderful. Any thoughts on that? Trevor, have we got any people asking questions here?
There's nothing coming through, Dave.
Okay, guys, so in which case you get off good behavior 10 minutes early. And so, however, we will send these slides through to you. And if you do have further thoughts or further questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. You can contact myself either through DMI or through Horses for Change. I would encourage you to take a look at the website. You've probably seen the website of DMI. You may not have seen the website for Horses for Change, which is www.horsesforchange.co.uk. No, it isn't. It's .com. Sorry. And so have a look at that. You might find that of interest. And as I say, any questions you do have, please do not hesitate to call and contact us. So guys, I hope you got something from that, and look out for the full version of the change management workshop, which we'll be doing online, and then also we'll be doing them live through the Horses for Change facility. Okay, chaps, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks, guys.